The 1970s were a golden bridge between raw soul and the birth of modern R&B, an era where the groove got deeper, the harmonies richer, and the stories more personal. Mid-decade, Earth, Wind, and Fire were lifting spirits sky high with a song that still makes hips sway. And at the very top, Marvin Gaye delivered a timeless plea that reshaped music forever. These are the 10 iconic R&B tracks that defined the decade and still define the feeling of soul today. Number 10, Love Train by the OJs, the global call for unity that shook the dance floor. Released in 1972 on Philadelphia International Records, this anthem dropped right as the world was caught between social change and musical rebirth. The OJs were entering a new chapter, guided by the legendary production duo Gamble and Huff, who were shaping the Philly soul sound with silky strings and heartbeat deep bass lines. Love Train wasn't just another groove, it was a movement wrapped in melody. Behind the scenes, the studio buzzed with energy. Musicians recorded their parts almost like a live sermon, stacking harmonies that felt bigger than the room itself. One fun detail, that irresistible guitar lick was added almost at the last minute, and it sealed the song's joyful momentum. Hearing it back then felt like riding through a city at dusk, streetlights blinking on, bell-bottoms swaying, strangers nodding to each other in rhythm. You could practically feel the world wanting to come together. Love Train raced up the charts and became the first Philly soul hit to reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Its message has outlived every decade since, echoing at weddings, block parties, and protests alike. If this was the decade's call for unity, the next song brought the sweet ache of romance straight to the surface. Number 9, Kiss and Say Goodbye by the Manhattans, the quiet storm breakup that stopped time. Released in 1906 on Columbia Records, this was a moment where R&B slowed down, took a deep breath, and let heartbreak speak in its softest voice. The Manhattans were already seasoned veterans by then, but this track marked a new peak, a fusion of classic doo-wop elegance with the emerging quiet storm style that dominated late-night radio. The song's creation carried its own story of longing.
Let's just kiss and say goodbye.
Lead singer Gerald Alston recorded his vocals in just a few takes, but the spoken word intro, that took hours to perfect because they wanted it to sound like a man trying to hold himself together. And here's a lesser-known gem. The band originally planned for another member to speak the intro, but Alston's emotional weight won everyone over. Hearing it in '76 felt like sitting on the edge of a dimly lit bed, the radio glowing in the dark, knowing a relationship was ending before anyone said the words. You could almost feel the summer heat pressing against the window as that opening line drifted in. The song soared to number 1, the Billboard Hot 100, and became one of the few R&B ballads of the decade to dominate across genres. Its legacy is woven into countless slow jams and late-night confessionals that followed. If that captured the tender pain of goodbye, the next track turns the emotion outward, into a groove ready to fight for the world around it. Number 8, Wake Up Everybody by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, the soulful call to action that felt like a sunrise. When this track arrived in 1975 on Philadelphia International Records, the world was shifting. New politics, new struggles, new hopes. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were already carving their place in soul history, but this song took them to another dimension. With Teddy Pendergrass on lead vocals, his voice carried the weight of urgency and the warmth of a mentor urging you forward. The studio moment behind this anthem is legendary. Musicians recorded it early in the morning, and Pendergrass, famously not a morning person, channeled that groggy frustration into a performance that sounded like someone literally shaking the world awake. One of the engineers later said, "You could feel the walls vibrating from the conviction in his delivery. Hearing it back in '75 felt like broadcasting hope from a storefront radio. The horns cut through the air like sunlight. The backing vocals wrapped around you like community arms, and every lyric felt like it belonged to the people, not just the charts." The song became a pillar of socially conscious R&B, embraced by activists, teachers, parents, and radio stations that recognized its power. Its influence echoes through decades of music that blends message with melody, from neo-soul to modern R&B's protest anthems. If this one urged the world to rise and do better, the next track reminds us that sometimes healing starts with a slow-burning groove that melts the tension away. Number 7, I'll Be Around by the Spinners. The silky promise that defined early 70s devotion, released in 1972 under Atlantic Records. This song became the Spinners' breakout moment as they transitioned into their golden era. Working with producer Tom Bell, one of the architects of the Philly soul sound, the group found a new musical home where their harmonies could blossom into something warm, polished, and unforgettable. What many fans don't know is that I'll Be Around started as a B-side. Atlantic originally pushed another track as the single, but DJs kept flipping the record over because the groove was simply undeniable. Once radio listeners got a taste of that hypnotic guitar riff and those velvet harmonies, the demand exploded. Hearing it back in '72 felt like stepping onto a city sidewalk. Just after a summer rain, street puddles reflected neon signs, strangers moved a little slower, and the whole world felt wrapped in a soft amber glow. The Spinners' promise, steady, patient, loyal, carried the kind of romantic certainty people craved. The track climbed to number 3 on the R&B charts and became one of the group's defining songs, influencing generations of smooth R&B crooners and inspiring countless samples in hip-hop and modern soul. Even today, its first few seconds can take you right back into that mellow, hopeful space. If this song was a promise whispered with a smile, the next one takes that tenderness and raises it into a full-blown celebration of joy and liberation. Number 6, Best of My Love by The Emotions, the joyful explosion that lit up every dance floor. By 1907, the R&B landscape was rich with rhythm, harmony, and celebration. And The Emotions arrived with a track that felt like pure sunshine bottled into sound. Signed to Columbia Records and guided by the genius of Maurice White from Earth, Wind & Fire, the group stepped into a new era of polished, radiant R&B. The creation of this hit carried its own sparkle. Maurice White wanted a song that matched the sisters' natural bright energy, so he pushed for a vocal arrangement that layered harmonies like a blooming bouquet, a fun behind-the-scenes note. Wanda, Sheila, and Jean reportedly recorded much of the chorus standing in a tight circle so their voices locked together like one radiant beam. Hearing it in '77 felt like catching the breeze through an open car window on a warm Saturday, driving past people dancing on porches and kids jumping double dutch on city sidewalks. The rhythm guitar flickered like sunlight, the bass line bounced with pure optimism, and the vocals soared with unfiltered joy. The track shot to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and won a Grammy for Best R&B Performance by a duo or group, cementing it as one of the decade's most uplifting anthems. Its influence runs deep, from modern dance tracks to movie soundtracks that need an instant dose of happiness. If this was joy overflowing, the next song takes us even deeper into the heart of the decade, where love, longing, and that unmistakable '70s soulfulness meet. If these '70s gems are stirring up memories, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It helps keep the soul alive for everyone. And don't go anywhere. We've still got 5 more timeless classics waiting to shine. Let's Stay Together by Al Green, the velvet vow that became the sound of forever. When this masterpiece arrived in 1971 on High Records, the world was just starting to understand Al Green's magic. He was stepping out of the shadows of gospel and early R&B, moving into a refined, intimate sound shaped by producer Willie Mitchell and the legendary High Rhythm section. What they created wasn't just a song, it was a feeling, a mood, a moment suspended in time. There's a bit of studio folklore around this one. Al Green originally wasn't sold on the track. He worried the melody was too gentle, too simple. But during the session, when drummer Al Jackson Jr. laid down that silky groove, everything changed. Green leaned into the microphone, closed his eyes, and delivered a vocal that felt like a man pouring out his whole heart with absolute honesty.
Let's stay together.
Hearing it in '71 felt like stepping into a warm room after being out in the cold. The record spun like a slow dance between candlelight shadows. Couples swayed, hearts softened. Even people who weren't in love suddenly felt like maybe they could be. Let's Stay Together soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became Al Green's signature song, defining his reign as the king of sensual soul. Its legacy stretches everywhere, from wedding aisles to movie soundtracks to presidents quoting it on stage. It's the kind of song that doesn't age, it just gets deeper. If this one wrapped us in love's gentlest embrace, the next track takes that warmth and turns it into something unbreakable, something powerful enough to move a generation. Number 4, Ain't No Stoppin' Us Now by McFadden and Whitehead, the unstoppable anthem of pride and progress. Released in 1979 on Philadelphia International Records, this powerhouse track arrived at the exact moment when R&B, disco, and soul were merging into a bright, confident sound. Gene McFadden and John Whitehead weren't just performers. They were seasoned songwriters who had spent years crafting hits for others. But this time, they stepped into the spotlight with a message that was unmistakably theirs. The backstory holds a spark of rebellion. McFadden and Whitehead reportedly wrote the song out of frustration, feeling they were being held back from releasing their own material. That determination lit the fuse. Once the first bass notes dropped, the room at Sigma Sound Studios erupted. Musicians said it felt less like recording and more like witnessing something take flight. Hearing it in '79 felt like walking into a block party where everybody, neighbors, families, entire communities, moved in unison. The beat strutted with confidence, the strings shimmered with hope, and the chorus burst through the speakers like a declaration. Progress was here, and nobody could turn it around. The song rocketed to #1 on the R&B charts and became an instant classic, adopted by marches, sports teams, graduation ceremonies, and anyone who needed a soundtrack of triumph. Its spirit still echoes through modern empowerment anthems, bridging generations with its infectious optimism. If this was the sound of rising up and moving forward, the next song brings us into the warm, late-night glow of a track that changed R&B forever, one slow groove at a time. Number 3, Me and Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul, the forbidden love story that stopped hearts in their tracks. When this ballad arrived in 1972 through Philadelphia International Records, it captured a side of romance rarely spoken aloud. Quiet, complicated, grown folks love. Billy Paul had been a jazz singer long before the world knew his name, and his smoky, velvet-saturated vocals brought a depth to the song that felt both intimate and cinematic. Gamblin' and Huff, the masterminds behind Philly Soul, shaped the arrangement like a late-night confession whispered over dim cafe lights. There's a famous tidbit behind the recording. Billy Paul insisted on dimming the studio lights to create the exact mood he needed. He wanted it to feel like the soft shadows of a small bar booth, the kind where two people sit close, talking low, knowing the world isn't watching, but should be.
Mrs.
The saxophone solo was recorded separately, but Paul asked to hear it in his headphones during his final vocal take so he could sing around the emotion. Hearing this in '72 felt like eavesdropping on a moment you knew wasn't meant for public ears. Rain tapping on a window, cars passing slowly outside, the kind of night where time seems to slow. When Paul crooned that unforgettable line, every listener held their breath. The song soared to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and won a Grammy, cementing it as one of the most iconic slow jams of the era. Its influence can be felt across decades of R&B storytelling. Whenever singers explore the messy, human, tender edges of love, they're touching the world Billy Paul helped shape. If this track revealed the secret corners of the heart, the next one lifts us right back into the bright, uplifting spirit that defined the golden era of '70s soul. Number 2, September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. The eternal celebration that made the whole world dance. When September burst onto the scene in 1978 under Columbia Records, Earth, Wind, and Fire were already titans of R&B, funk, and soul. But this track, crafted by Maurice White, Al McKay, and Allie Willis, became something even bigger. It wasn't just a hit, it was a feeling, a memory, a moment you could step into anytime you needed joy. The creation story is legendary. Allie Willis initially questioned the now iconic Badia hook, asking Maurice White what it meant. His answer? Nothing. It feels good. And that was the magic. EWF didn't chase meaning, they chased emotion. They wanted a track that made people move before they even understood why. The band recorded the horn lines like they were sculpting beams of light, and the rhythm section locked into a groove as smooth as butter melting on warm cornbread. Hearing it in '78 felt like rolling down your car windows on the first cool night of fall. Laughter in the air, streetlights shimmering, friends calling your name from half a block away. The opening guitar riff hit like a spark being struck, and once the horns kicked in, every party, cookout, and wedding reception found its heartbeat. September climbed the charts worldwide, becoming a perennial celebration anthem. It's the soundtrack to generations, sampled endlessly, played at every joyous moment imaginable, and capable of making even reluctant dancers sway. Decades later, its energy hasn't dimmed. If anything, it feels even more alive. And if you think this burst of joy is untouchable, wait until we reach #1, because the top spot belongs to a song that didn't just define the '70s, it helped define the soul of an entire era. #1, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, the masterpiece that redefined soul music forever. In 1971, when this landmark single was released on Motown's Tamla label, Marvin Gaye was standing at a crossroads, emotionally, spiritually, and artistically. He had lost his singing partner Tammy Terrell just a year earlier. His brother had returned from Vietnam with haunting stories, and the world around him echoed with protest, confusion, and a longing for peace. From all that pain and reflection, Marvin crafted something unprecedented, an R&B song that carried the weight of a prayer, a plea, and a vision for humanity. Motown's founder, Berry Gordy, initially rejected the track, calling it too political. Marvin refused to back down. He went on strike from the label, vowing he would never record another note unless What's Going On was released. When it finally hit the airwaves, it sold 100,000 copies on its first day. The world was ready, aching even, for Marvin's gentle strength. The recording was its own kind of magic. The opening chatter came from football players, including Detroit Lions legend Mel Farr, warming up in the studio. The double lead vocals, Marvin's voice layered over itself, were actually an accident. An engineer played 2 vocal takes at once, and Marvin loved the texture so much he kept it. It became one of the most influential choices in R&B arranging. Hearing it in '71 felt like stepping out onto a balcony at dawn. Cool air brushing your skin, the city quiet but restless, and Marvin's voice asking, softly but firmly, where do we go from here? The bass line wrapped around listeners like a heartbeat, while the saxophone cried with gentle sorrow. It was a protest song that didn't shout. Instead, it embraced. What's Going On didn't just top the R&B charts. It reshaped the entire direction of soul music. It proved that R&B could heal, question, uplift, and challenge all at once. Today, it sits at the peak of countless greatest songs lists and remains a soundtrack for every generation seeking peace and understanding. If this anthem showed us the soul of the 70s, the journey doesn't end here, because the next era only gets richer, deeper, and more unforgettable. From euphoric celebrations to tender heartbreak, from grooves that shook block parties to messages that stirred the world. These songs are the heartbeat of the 1970s, an era when R&B blossomed into something timeless. Thank you for joining us on this soul stroll through one of music's most defining decades. If you want to keep the groove alive, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more soul stories on the way. And don't stop now. Click on the end screen to watch our next video. 10 most iconic R&B songs from 1960s that defined the era. Let's keep the rhythm rolling.